In today's video, I wanted to wrap up on the completion for all the side quests featured in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. In fact, these are the only 3 quests that I have left to cover in the Game of the Year edition for this installment. Even better, and coincidentally, I haven't completed them ever, and I've been playing this game for quite some time. At first, these quests didn't strike me as being that interesting, but the more I played through them, the more I developed an appreciation for their purpose within the game. Technically, there are 9 quests in which I'll be going over today, but 7 of them I just lumped together. The plugins and master training quests are ones that I haven't actually done yet either, but I'll save those for a future video. As per usual, the facts and information provided come from the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. Starting off, I went through the first quest titled Go Fish. Go Fish is a rather short quest, but in the end feels rather quirky and kind of fun. It begins with the player making their way to the settlement of Way, just west of the Imperial City. In and around the settlement, I saw an older Breton man wandering around a shack. His name is Aelwyn Merriwald, and speaking with him sounds like this.
You know, stranger, there comes a time in every man's life when he has to admit that he's lost the fight. Well, I've fought and I've lost. Who did I lose to? Who is my great enemy? Oh, don't laugh. It's a bunch of damn fish.
I'm prompted to ask further questions or laugh in his face. The latter sounds like this.
Ah, see, I knew you'd laugh. Some big hero you are. You're all the same. Nothing to do but laugh at an old man and his troubles. Come back to laugh at the pathetic old man, have we? To the pit with you. Leave me alone.
This dialogue prompt lowers Aelwyn's disposition, and if it's below 20, he'll continue to shut down any conversation attempts. The only option from here is to raise it back up via a charm spell. Otherwise, choosing to help him out sounds like this.
Go on and Wait. Help? Oh, well then. I'm a fisherman. Or at least I was. Till one of those slaughterfish damn near took my leg off. I was collecting their scales, see? I had a contract with this young alchemist. You wouldn't believe what he was paying for those scales. Then, last month, one of the bastards got a hold of my leg. Took me right out of the business. But this alchemist, he needs the scales right away.
I ask him about the scales.
The alchemist was paying so much for the scales that I'm close to having enough saved so that I can retire. But now I can't get out there to the lake. Not with this leg. I only needed 12 more scales. Can you believe it? I was so close. I've picked up a few things in my travel. If you head out there and bring me back the 12 scales that I need, I can make it worth your time. Help an old fisherman out, won't you?
The conversation ends and the quest officially begins. The compass directs me to go and swim out in the middle of the lake. Doing so, it turns out that it points me to the exact location of where I'll find a Rumare slaughterfish. They're seemingly bigger and tougher than regular slaughterfish. They have a nasty bite and a lot more health than you'd think. Killing it and looking inside of its inventory, I'm able to take one sample of its fish scales. This is when the compass updates and directs me to a new position out on the water. Swimming over, I find my next target and repeat the process. To be honest, there isn't much more to this part than a very repetitive hunt for fish. In truth, I had tried to do this quest once before. The reason I never ended up finishing it was because I couldn't find the 6th or so fish. Looking at the quest logs, it turns out that the Rumare slaughterfish aren't exactly plentiful in the lake. It just so happens that every time one fish is killed and its scales are harvested, the next fish is programmed to spawn in. So in my instance, fish number 6 was stuck on the shoreline, far away from the arrow. If the lake was filled with them, it wouldn't be that huge of an issue, but because this one needed to die in order for me to find the others, it was almost impossible to progress. I got really lucky in that I actually managed to find it on the shoreline this time around, but the previous time I attempted this quest, I didn't have the same fortune. Something I really enjoy about this one is that you don't discover it through a rumor or by Aelwyn approaching you. You have to physically take the time out of your playthrough and choose to speak with him, in a way creating this feeling of exclusivity. Some fun facts about this quest, which come directly from the unofficial wiki. The journal tells you that Way is southwest of the Imperial City, although it's actually exactly west. It makes me wonder if perhaps Way was meant to be located somewhere else, or if the writer just didn't know where the settlement was going to be placed. The journal also details that Aelwyn's reasoning for needing help is that he's getting too old, but he says that it's actually due to a leg injury. Again, it makes me wonder if perhaps the writing changed a little bit during the making of this quest. Lastly, the wiki points out that both the journal and Aelwyn state that Lake Rumere is directly north of Way. In reality, Lake Rumere is due east. I thought that this one could slide though, as most of the fish you catch are located in the northern part of the lake, but it is true, as pointed out by the wiki, that you find the fish to the north, east, and south of the settlement. This only makes me further wonder if Way was meant to be in an entirely different spot. In fact, perhaps somewhere either in the southern section of the Great Forest or near the alien ruin of Vindicel. In and around those parts are where the directions given by the journal and Aelwyn actually make sense. Regardless though, once all 12 Rumere slaughterfish scales were acquired, I returned back to Aelwyn.
I don't know what I'll do if you don't get those scales for me. I've saved so much for my retirement, but it's just not enough.
I handed over all the scales.
By the 9, you've got the scales! Thank you. Let it never be said that there are no kind souls in this world. I'll give you this ring in trade. I have no use for it anymore, but I imagine that they would be very valuable to someone like you. Thank you, stranger. You've shown me kindness, and I will think of you in the long, comfortable days ahead.
The conversation ends and I exchange the scales for something called the Jewel of Rumere. It's an enchanted ring and has the powers of water breathing and fortify athletics for 4 points on self. More importantly, it seems like it could fetch a nice price at the local merchant. It's odd that he decided not to sell the ring instead and make off for retirement. Speaking with Aelwyn again brings a neat little surprise.
I'm looking forward to my retirement. Long days in the stable with the horses, long mornings in bed, and best of all, no more fish.
I asked him where he keeps his savings.
I don't trust you enough to talk about that.
Bribing and greasing him up a bit, I tried again.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I took some of the money I saved and paid a mage to lock the rest of it away in a box inside my house. Nothing can open it except for this key right here. And there ain't no way anyone is getting this key while I'm still breathing. Yes, sir. I worked too hard to collect that money. I'm not about to let anyone steal it from me.
The conversation ends and I decided to see what he was working with. I made my way inside of his house and looked around for some mystical lockbox. As it turns out, the only locked container in here was a regular chest. It just needed a key to be accessed. I was about to split Aelwyn's head open for said key, but first tried out pickpocketing. It worked, and I noticed he had 528 gold on his person, which certainly isn't anything to scoff at. Excitedly, I rushed back inside and opened up the chest. Disappointingly, there was only 23 gold pieces inside. I felt quite bad for the guy, as I genuinely don't think that'll be too much for retirement, unless he's planning on dying by wintertime. Who knows how much those scales will fetch him though, as it could be a fortune. I wish we could have found out who the alchemist was, and then from there, deliver more scales personally for a reoccurring price, but that's as far as this quest goes. The next quest for today conveniently takes place right beside Aelwyn, and technically is in the settlement of Way. This one is called a Venerable Vintage, and exactly like Go Fish, it's not necessarily public and obvious. Wandering inside of Wanted Inn, you're likely to only see one person in there, the proprietor, Narussa. Unless you have the official plugins, then there's likely to be one other person. Speaking with the High Elf sounds like this.
Welcome to the Wanted Inn. Could I interest you in a room or perhaps a bit of wine?
I asked about the wine.
Yes, actually, I'm quite fond of collecting all manners of wines from all over Tamriel. But one vintage continues to elude me. Shadow Banish wine. How I'd love to add it to my collection. Say, that gives me an idea. You look like the adventuring type. If you can retrieve 6 bottles of Shadow Banish wine, I'll gladly pay you well. All I know about them is that they're found in the many fort ruins scattered all over Cyrodiil.
I asked further about the Shadow Banish wine.
Well, apparently the wine is so rare because it was only made in one tiny batch. It's the product of an alchemist who was also a vintner. Besides tasting incredible, the magic within the wine allows the imbiber to be gifted with Night Eye. The vintner made it special for the Legion soldiers posted at the forts when they were active long ago. It was perfect for keeping lookouts warm on cold nights and helping them see better in the dark. Clever, eh? Keep looking for that wine. Farewell.
It actually is a pretty neat tidbit on the rare beverage. Exiting the conversation, this quest goes exactly how you'd expect it to. There's no quest marker pointing you to the exact locations of the wine. All you have to go off of is that they're likely to be found in old forts around Cyrodiil. So, essentially this quest pushes the player and adds extra incentive to go off and explore the local dungeons. The only catch is that there are over 50 forts present within the game. Of these 50, only 8 contain bottles of the Shadow Banish wine, and if you have the official plugins, that increases to 10. In other words, I can't imagine how long it would have taken players back in the day to find these bottles. The nice part is that this quest was likely meant as a long-term, take them as they come sort of task, similar to that of seeking your roots and the Collector. The 8 forts are Fort Aris, Karmala, Durik, Grief, Irony, Magia, Cinia, and Vlastaris. Some of them have more zones to cover than others, but it seems like most of them actually have the bottles of Shadow Banish put away in a chest within the first zone. So, if you're looking specifically for the wine and not to explore, kind of like I was, there's some leeway when it comes to usage of time. Some facts on this quest, provided by the unofficial Elder Scrolls wiki, include the inability to duplicate the wine using the duplication glitch. I'm not exactly sure why that is, as it's not flagged as a quest item. There are some items in the game though that genuinely don't take for the glitch, so maybe Shadow Banish falls into that category. The rare wine can also apparently be sold at other merchants, just not for the same price that Narissa offers, so it's probably better to make the trip out to her, especially for what comes after. Probably the most useful bit of information here is the fact that each chest that contains the Shadow Banish wine actually gets replenished with the contents inside. So, once you've found a spot that contains the wine, every couple of days you can go back in there to collect more, until you have the 6 needed ones. Brought up by the UESP, it's funny how apparently there was only one tiny batch made of the rare alcohol, yet there's an infinite restocking supply of it. In theory, there should only be 20 bottles out in circulation, if there are 10 forts which contain 2 bottles each. Once you have the 6 bottles, you can return back to Narissa at Wannet Inn.
Any luck on those bottles of Shadow Banish wine yet?
I inquire about the wine.
I'm at a loss for words. You actually found 6! These will hold an honored place in my collection. I don't know what else to say, but thank you. Oh, I almost forgot. Here's your finder's fee, worth every single coin, I assure you. I'll tell you what else I'll do since you seem so resourceful. If you find any more bottles of the wine, I'll gladly pay you well for them.
Trying to hand her wine without any in your inventory gets this snarky response.
If I'm to buy the wine from you, you need to have it with you.
6 bottles of this unique wine nets you 1,000 gold, which feels a little low considering you likely would have went through a lot of trouble to get these bottles, especially back in the day. If you're a low-level player, going through your journey with no exploits, cheats, or glitches for gold, this could certainly prove handy. Actually having some wine on hand and selling it to her gets this response.
Welcome back to the Wannet Inn. Looking for a room? Or did you have any more Shadow Banish wine for me, perhaps? You have more? Amazing! Well, as promised, your finder's fee once again.
Similar to the Blackbow situation with the Count of Leeuwin, she only accepts the bottles one at a time. She pays out 100 gold per new bottle, which is less than the original fee for the 6 bottles, but more than you'd receive at any other shop. Regardless, it was certainly an interesting quest, and again, likely one that was meant to be completed at a slower and more personal pace, as well as one meant to shoo the player out into dungeons. Then, for the 3rd and final quest, or in this case 7, I've never bought a house within the game and completely furnished it. Technically, I did buy the Rosethorn Hall in Skingrad to showcase the Helping Hands quest, but that's the only house I've ever purchased, and I didn't even completely furnish it. To demonstrate the template for each city's house buying quest, I started out in the Imperial City. Making my way over to the Imperial Commerce Office in the Market District, I spoke with Venetia Melisea.
Venetia Melisea, Office of Imperial Commerce. You got complaints? Of course you got complaints. Who doesn't?
I inquired about buying a house in town.
Why? I mean, of course. All I have available right now is a hovel on the waterfront.
Here I have 3 options. The first one I tried was to complain about its price of 2,000 gold.
I agree, but someone will be foolish enough to buy it.
Then I tried declining the offer.
That's okay. I'm sure I can find a buyer soon.
And lastly, I agreed to the price.
Really? Then you've just become a homeowner. Here is your house key. You'll find it in the waterfront district. It's not much to look at. You may want to spruce it up a bit with some furnishings. I'd suggest talking to Sergius Verus at Three Brothers Trade Goods in the Market District.
This is more or less the same interaction that occurs in every city whilst buying a house. The seller, whether it be the count or a steward, will offer the 3 different dialogue options. Upon purchasing the house, they then send you to the local general store where you can buy upgrades and expansions for your new home. In the case for the Imperial City, Sergius Verus can sell you a total of 5 upgrades, each costing about 400 gold. So, in order to complete this quest and fully furnish your waterfront home, you're looking at spending a grand total of 4,000 gold. To hit you with some numbers, the next most expensive property is the house in Bruma, which, after all of the upgrades, comes to a sum of 7,900 gold. Continuing onwards, the Leeuwin property will cost you around 14,000. The Bruma property will cost you 19,900. The Shaden Hall property will cost you 30,000. Coral's Arbor Watch will cost you 39,400. Then lastly, the most expensive property, Skingrad's Rosethorn Hall, will end up costing you a total of 49,000 gold. If you were to go through with purchasing and fully furnishing every single property available to you, that would run up a tab of about 164,200 gold. That's certainly a lot of plundering and fencing that you would need to do, but it's not impossible by any means. As for the city of Anvil, there's no house available for purchase through the Count or Countess because that's where Velwyn Benerus steps in with the quest, Where Spirits Have Lease. Interestingly, there are expansion plans that you can steal from several citizens, saving you some money in the long run. For example, Stantis Varid of the Imperial City has kitchen and wall-hanging blueprints in his private chambers, and Laurent Lurzog has storage and wall-hanging blueprints in his basement. Here are some interesting facts about some of the quests. Something I noticed, and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages touches on as well, is that the Bruma house is the only home with a fireplace that isn't lit, and it's the city where a fireplace is likely needed all year round. On the topic of fireplaces, the only 2 houses to not have any at all are Arborwatch in Coral, which is the second most expensive home, and the Shack in Leeuwin. In order to buy Rosethorn Hall in Skingrad, Vanderalen Trebatius gets evicted. Upon speaking with him, he doesn't bring up the elephant in the room, but his disposition does get decreased. On the topic of Rosethorn Hall, purchasing the property gives you access to the Rosethorn Cache side quest. Additionally, purchasing the Servants' Quarters expansion gives you access to the Helping Hand side quest. A lot of the NPCs who are selling the homes actually need to have their disposition raised beyond a certain point for them to even consider you as a buyer. Because I've never owned a home in one of the cities besides Benerus Manor, although I never really used it, I got to experience fast traveling whilst indoors for the first time. For some odd reason, it did feel kind of neat, and I can understand that this mechanic would prove useful to those playing as vampires. A lot of the houses felt really cozy and inviting after sprucing them up, which made it even more worth it. Beyond that, there isn't much more to these quests besides buying some property, outfitting it with containers, closets, dressers, wardrobes, barrels, food, etc. So that wraps up the final 3, or technically 9, side quests in which I needed to cross off my completion list. I still need to cover the other official plugins as well as the master training quests, but those will come down the line. Until next time, keep on adventuring.